as I know the whole lineup for this month, I want to draw in some language that Jana's using to some of the other guests. So we've talked a lot about forming these kind of fear bonds. And so there's going to be a guest this month that talks about fear bonds and how they're formed. And that's essentially what's happening is safety and threats and perceived threats, enemy mode, threatened mode, perceived threats. That's kind of how we got there. So we're going to have a show about that. Then the other thing that Jana's been talking about, another guest calls the verbal logic explainer, or the VLE. When something happens to us, we put a narrative on it, and that narrative is what forms the memory. And so our narrative might be inaccurate, or that narrative sounds like an implicit memory from our past. I'm getting this feedback about not taking out the trash, and that reminds me of the feedback I got from my dad about the trash where I got a beating or something, right? So that implicit memory comes forward to this other memory, and then I can react to my spouse in a way that they're like, whoa, I just said, can you take out the trash? What's happening? So Jana really just kind of filled in some of the dots there of how that happened. And then we're going to end this series talking about how Brainspotting and is a great way to help with some of our triggers, but in healing our relationship, back to a term that Barbara uses called grace and space, your face of grace and how you treat the other person who is healing, your interactions in grace is part of the healing process. And all of these steps have to be done. We got to break some of the trauma triggers and our fear bonds, learn about ourselves, how we apply, and then we can build joy with our partner. We cannot build joy with someone we think is a threat. Right. So more dates, more sex, and talk more is not going to work if just sitting down at the table feels like a threat to me, or we can't talk about these 12 subjects because someone's going to get dysregulated. We've got to have some success in those before we just jump to joy building. Joy building sounds great. Doing more fun things sounds great. But if I don't know what Barbara's going to be like from time to time, I might not want to go to coffee with her on Fridays if I'm not sure which version of Barbara is showing up, right? So I think that's for any people, right? Like, I want to enjoy being with you, not being like, oh, I don't say this and this around Barbara, she's going to get upset,
well, Yeah, the joy piece is definitely joy. Physical intimacy, true safety is really, I tell people, it's the rose that flowers when the roots, the structure of the bush, the leaves, and everything else is in place. It's the fruit of the relationship. It's not the beginning of the relationship. And, there are the 5 levels of intimacy. I remember you took me through that, Stephanie, where so many people enter sexual intimacy at the beginning of their relationship, when it really should be the last thing that people enjoy and feel safe enough to enjoy and have gotten, compatible through that process. And I think what you're saying too, Stephanie, about dysregulation overall, and we're kind of back to where we started about the tone of what's going on, the tension in the relationship, because often when we're dysregulated, we don't understand the damage we're doing, what we're saying, how it's landing, the impact of what we're having. Our intention is just to assert ourselves, but the impact can be very destructive. And when both parties are defending, protecting, launching, drones and Scud missiles at each other, no wonder there's no progress being made, and everybody just wants to go to their corners and not engage. So,
yes. So how does being more resilient help that? So we talked about, like, there's triggers. The Brainspotting can help with that, but building resiliency and capacity, because we all know that in a neurodiverse couple, this is months to years, and we've got to have some resiliency and capacity to work it out. So will you kind of take us to the resiliency and buoyancy part of what you do as well? That was my introduction to you, was the resilient stuff, which is totally in alignment with everything that I do and believe as well. So tell us a little bit about resiliency building.
Yeah, well, I think it relates to what Barbara was just saying, and that is, when we're in a dynamic with another person and they're triggered, that can be really hard for us and we aren't aware of ourselves. So the most important piece here is to start becoming aware of yourself. We see when the other person's dysregulated, but they're sniffing out right away when we are, and we might not even realize it yet. So we build resiliency by starting to learn about what our own nervous system is doing, becoming the observer of ourselves, and beginning to understand ways that we dysregulate and what that feels like inside. And then we start to build our window of tolerance so that it can expand by using various tools and modalities so that it takes more and more of a trigger for us to dysregulate. In other words, we become less sensitive to triggers over time as we start to tend to our nervous system and become aware of what it needs sooner. Often one of the things that drives fast dysregulation for someone who's neurodivergent is there's a bit of a disconnect between their mind and their body. They might not realize they're hungry. They might not realize they're thirsty. They might not realize that this situation is feeling overstimulated until they are dysregulated. So some of the tools and exercises build that interoception and connection to the proprioception so that we're able to sense where are we at in space, what are we feeling, what do we need at any given moment, so that we're aware of approaching dysregulation rather than from going, I'm unaware to, I'm totally dysregulated and now it's everyone around me that's the problem.
So, so we're talking about this whole umbrella of dysregulation, and it occurs to me that there's so many other things that falls under it. Phobias, which, back in the day, fear of flying, fear of falling off something, claustrophobia, what's also called PDA, or persistent demand avoidance, or what is the other name for that? PDA?
We got pervasive demand avoidance and the pervasive demand for autonomy. So it's got 3 or 4 different names floating around out there. But
it means I don't want to do what you want me to do, and I'm not going to do it. And it's a reaction that's triggered. And, there's probably going to be even more as this whole, concept of neurodiversity begins to get much more known, as it has been over the last 10 years, that there's going to be more labels that people want to put on things like, oh, I have that, and I have this, and I have that, more to stay where they're at versus to overcome that. So, what do you think, Jana? I mean, I know you've worked with people prior to getting into neurodiversity who have had chronic pain and insurmountable chronic pain. And what was it about, like what you said or how you got them to believe that you could actually get over this, that could help us, work with our clients and help them go, yeah, we don't want to say, oh, rejection sensitivity isn't a thing, because their feeling is real. We have to validate what they're feeling. It's not a thing you have to be stuck with. Like chronic pain is a thing. They were feeling chronic pain. So how do you work with your clients and get them into a, maybe I can change this mindset?
The most important thing to keep in mind is all of the things we're describing are moderated in the brain. The brain sends pain messages. The brain sends fear messages, and it also sends rejection messages or avoidance messages. So if we can work from the perspective of the brain rather than the issue that we're perceiving that's uncomfortable, that puts us in the driver's seat to have some traction to go somewhere else with it. So it can apply to any product of dysregulation, and that can show up as autoimmune, digestive, pain, neurological issues. Those things aren't only reserved for people who are neurodivergent, and so the PDA and rejection sensitivity I see as much more about dysregulation. I see it plenty in the non-neurodiverse population. So it's more about how the brain is perceiving and responding to threat than it is about the brain wiring.
So what resistance do you run into with people staying stuck? Because, I'm sure a lot of people are trying things that are listening, are going to be trying things that are listening today. How do you help people get unstuck and move forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of factors that keep people stuck is I really think the trigger is the problem. And that can look like anything, right? I think the food I'm eating is making me sick, or I think that it's my partner. And if I was just away from them, I wouldn't feel stressed, etc. So that can be sort of a mental barrier that can either be approached with education or brain spotting or both. Another piece that can sometimes keep people stuck is they feel like they either unconsciously feel like they deserve it, or they even think it's part of God's assignment for them in terms of suffering, because we're all told that, to be a Christian means to suffer. And so sometimes that can be interpreted as this is just my lot in life. And so they don't believe that God might have an alternative for them. Another place people can get stuck is they just don't want to do the work and look at themselves, right? And, we're going to find that in every realm of treatment or therapy. There are going to be some people who just don't feel like looking at themselves and doing their part. It's easier to point the finger. And I'm sure there are other reasons people get stuck. But ultimately, it can be helpful to have a conversation about what's the bigger goal and what do you have to lose by trying? And then even if you're having trouble believing it, what if we start practicing as if it were true? And oftentimes the brain will come along and follow.
Oh, I love that. Practicing as if it were true, and then the brain will come along and follow. And that's living by faith, really. You can't see the result, but you believe it's worth a try. And this kind of throws back to early conversations I've had with you, Stephanie, about the stages of motivation and change. And, where people are they really willing to not only get into action and do the work and make progress? Or are they thinking about it or dipping their toe in? Or are they satisfied? Like satisfied in being unsatisfied is really kind of sad. But that's very true for people who have addictions or really ingrained habits or patterns of family dysfunction, where they say, I'm from a long line of alcoholics. That's just my lot in life, right? So you're right. Christ came to set us free, and he gave us a brain that can be free. And we have the agency within our brain to fine tune our sense of freedom and begin living in that. It isn't a hocus pocus, just pray hard enough sometimes either, right? Prayer can be a part of that process. And affirming things and being affirmed in prayer is a big part of setting your mind on higher sights and better things. So
yeah, absolutely. I thought of one more for you, and that is oftentimes people unconsciously allow their symptoms to set boundaries for them because it's too scary to do it themselves. So if you get a headache and aren't available, that's easier than saying our conversations don't feel good, and I would like to talk about our relationship. So of course we do not choose that on purpose. This is something that the brain does to protect us, without us being aware. But, sometimes when there's chronic pain patterns, that can be one of the factors that got us there. Is the brain said, I've got to protect you somehow. I don't know what else to do. And so learning to be brave and say what's not working and to say no sometimes can really help people to find their window of tolerance and create some regulation that doesn't require their body to kick up a symptom to do it for them.
Man, so many good things here. So I want to kind of recap some of the things we talked about. We talked about that everyone's brain could do a little bit better with regulation. Like no neurotype is born with I got regulation down pat, right? So we all could do better at learning more about our central nervous system, our own regulation or dysregulation. And if we're trapped in a relationship where we're in a fear bond and we're, both in this heightened trauma space, I cannot change my relationship on my own, but I can work on me, my capacity, my bandwidth, my window of tolerance. And Barbara said, and you don't tolerate abuse. It's not like in fried green tomatoes when Ruth said, I would just pray for the Lord to let me have another beating. No, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about getting over the another beating. Just give me the strength to bear the beating. No, we're not talking about building resiliency for abuse. We're talking about to me, this feels like when you're in that place, like you've recognized it, like we're stuck, but we don't know how to do it. This is like where you could pivot from that fear bond to the joy bond or the love bond, doing your own work of regulating myself and my triggers, brain spotting, resiliency stuff, capacity building that Jana's doing. And that will have a positive effect on the relationship, but it's not relationship work. Right. I've got to do me and stay in my lane, as Barb says. You got to do you and stay your lane. We've got to figure out how we're tripping up each other, and what my own stuff I brought to this marriage before I even met you is tripping me up. And that's where we start to do the work. And this, we have to have resiliency, because this is not months, this is years. And it trips people up when I say that. So if you hear any person saying they can fix your neurodiverse marriage in months with a money back guarantee, you need to run.
Yeah.
Because that is not how this works. You've got to have the law. If you've decided to stay, you've got to have the capacity with each other and in yourself to move forward. Did I misquote anything that you said, Jana? Does that sound okay as to what we talked about?
That sounds great, Stephanie. Thank you.
I want to know more. I do want you to keep me and have it when you're got your certification. I'd love to have you back on, because I think that could be its own segment all of itself, because it's not MDR, but it kind of works on some of the premises that MDR does, which is a evidence-based treatment. And back to something Barbara said, talking about, and maybe you too, Jana, talk therapy for your trauma, and talking about your incidences is talking and talk therapy about what's going on and what's wrong all the time. Nursing and rehearsing is going to keep your brain stuck. You don't deny and dismiss, but you can't rehearse and nurse it either, because that's not going to be good for you and your own brain. So as we're ending, I'm going to make sure we have enough time for everybody to talk about where to find you. So Jana, since you're our guest, tell us about your website. What are some things that people can find on your website? And you're not a couples coach, so kind of define what exactly you do with individuals.
Sure. My website is janamsmith.com, and there you can find some recordings that are free tools that you can engage with right away. You can find all of the podcast interviews, videos that I've made with Barbara, a couple presentations that I've done. And then you can explore the online course that I offer and see coaching options. And then I also have a resilience library subscription where you can just pay a small amount every month and then have access to a bunch of somatic tools. And I'm already offering Brainspotting, so you can also just access that through coaching. I'm basically offering it as a part of any coaching session. So where needed, it's available. And then as far as who I work with and couples versus individuals, so I work with adults and individuals. And if people are in a marriage and both people are experiencing dysregulation issues, they can both work with me, but I'm not going to work on the marriage. I can work with each of them on the regulation pieces. And if one of them wants to go through the course, the other one can go through the course. So I don't make people buy it individually. If they're in the same family, that would be available to both of them.
Wonderful. Now, Barb, remind people what you do and how to find hope for couples.
I am at the website is bg-hc.com, which is short for Barbara Grant Hope for Couples. So bg-hc.com. And even if they just Google Barbara Grant Neurodiverse Coach, they will find me. And I offer one-on-one coaching. I offer a community, online drop-in community for neurotypical women who are faith-based that can come together weekly. And some of that has levels of coaching, one-on-one coaching bundled into it. And I'll be having courseware that's coming out that people could just buy and work through some of the things on boundaries, some of the things on communication, some of the things on self-care, et cetera. So, and when you come to me and you're that dysregulated, I will be sending you to Jana.
Me too. She's on my referral list too. And so if you're listening to me, I actually am very full, and I will going to probably refer you to Barbara. So I'm trying to expand my coaching of coaches. So if you are a coach and you're like, I would like to learn more about being neurodiverse certified or neurodiverse aware, I am open for coaching and consulting there. And I really like groups. And so I've really been expanding into groups. So if you are needing care right now, you should probably reach out to Barbara Grant, who has openings. And if you're looking for resiliency, regulation, brain spotting, please reach out to Jana M. Smith. Always wonderful to talk with you, ladies. So I'm going to end us with our little quote here that you are not alone on this journey, and there is hope for your future.